The shooting of Renee Nicole Good by Immigration and Customs Enforcement Deportation Officer Jonathan Ross on January 7, 2026, in Minneapolis represents a pivotal event at the intersection of law enforcement tactics and broader immigration policy debates. Good, a 37-year-old United States citizen and mother of 3, was fatally shot during a large-scale federal operation aimed at apprehending undocumented immigrants with criminal records or fraudulent statuses. The incident unfolded on a snowy residential street near 41st Avenue South and East 34th Street, where Good's maroon Honda Pilot was positioned diagonally, impeding federal vehicles amid scattered protests and monitoring activities. Video footage from multiple bystander angles depicts agents approaching her vehicle, issuing conflicting commands to move the car or exit it, followed by her aggressive acceleration, tires spinning on ice, veering past Ross with possible light contact but no evident intent to run him over. Ross, a 43-year-old veteran with over a decade in the agency's Enforcement and Removal Operations Special Response Team, stepped aside and fired multiple shots through the driver's side window, striking her in the head. The vehicle subsequently crashed into a parked car. This sequence highlights the tensions inherent in high-stakes enforcement actions, where split-second decisions can lead to tragic outcomes, yet it also underscores the operational challenges faced by agents in hostile environments. Critics of the shooting argue that deadly force was unwarranted, as the immediate threat appeared to have passed when the shots were fired, with alternatives like further de-escalation available on the uncrowded street. Good was unarmed and had no prior felonies, and analyses of synced footage suggest her maneuver was an attempt to flee or maneuver away rather than target Ross deliberately. Supporters, however, maintain it was self-defense, citing her vehicle's movement as weaponization in a chaotic standoff, especially given Ross's prior injury in a 2025 incident where he was dragged by a fleeing suspect's vehicle during an arrest of a convicted sex offender. Federal officials, including Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, President Trump, and Vice President J.D. Vance, described the act as justified against domestic terrorism, emphasizing the 1,300% increase in assaults on agents and Good's role in monitoring and disrupting the raid. Local officials such as Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey and Governor Tim Walz disputed this, labeling the federal narrative exaggerated and calling for state involvement in the investigation, which has been denied access to evidence. The event has sparked widespread protests, vigils, and heightened scrutiny, illustrating the polarized interpretations that frame individual accountability against systemic priorities. At its core, the shooting encapsulates the conflict between micro-level tactical decisions and macro-level national security imperatives in addressing illegal immigration. The operation, dubbed the largest ever with approximately 2,000 agents deployed, targeted undocumented individuals involved in fraud or crimes, amid reports of billions in scams linked to immigrant communities. Good's activism, tied to IC Watch, groups trained to resist federal actions, positioned her as an interferer in a necessary duty to remove threats, raising questions about the criminality of such support under laws prohibiting obstruction or harboring. This incident, while tragic and potentially avoidable, is seen by some as an inevitable byproduct of enforcing borders against an invasion enabled by prior administration's policies, setting the stage for escalating confrontations between enforcement advocates and opponents. As tensions rise with the National Guard activated as a precaution and calls for expanded agency powers, the event underscores the irreconcilable divisions threatening national cohesion, where one death pales against the broader goal of preventing harms from undocumented criminals. The sequence of events and tactical dynamics. The sequence began with Good's vehicle partially blocking traffic during the raid, as agents conducted arrests in a residential neighborhood amid small-scale protests. Eyewitness accounts and footage indicate she was acting as a legal observer, or protester, waving agents ahead while monitoring their activities, consistent with organized efforts to alert communities and delay deportations. When agents approached, shouting commands and attempting to open her door or reach inside, the situation intensified. Good reversed briefly, then accelerated forward, veering right past Ross. Analyses show the wheels turned to avoid direct collision, with the close proximity on icy roads creating ambiguity. Federal claims assert contact or injury, while critics see no strike or drag. Ross fired at least 3 shots as the SUV passed, leading to the crash and Good's death from head wounds, highlighting how environmental factors like snow contributed to the chaos. Tactical critiques focus on Ross's positioning near the front bumper, which placed him in potential harm's way, though he moved aside just before full acceleration. Supporters argue this was reasonable given the perceived threat of a weaponized vehicle, especially in light of Ross's 2025 injury requiring stitches after being dragged 100 feet. The uncrowded street and lack of broader endangerment suggest de-escalation was feasible, yet the heightened state of awareness from prior assaults on agents, up 1,300%, may have influenced the response. Good's aggressive driving, while not felonious, intersected with the operation's urgency, where one federal vehicle was stuck, potentially pinning agents in a hostile area with protesters filming from sidewalks. This dynamic illustrates the challenges of real-time decision-making in enforcement ops, where conflicting commands and protester interference can escalate rapidly. The incident's video evidence, lacking clear intent to harm, leans against micro-level justification, but the context of ongoing resistance frames it as a predictable outcome. As protests spread, with chants and vigils drawing crowds, the event serves as a cautionary example of how individual actions in tense standoffs can lead to irreversible consequences, amplifying calls for tactical adjustments while underscoring the risks agents face in fulfilling their mandate. Legal frameworks and jurisdictional conflicts. Federal authority under the Immigration and Nationality Act grants ICE nationwide enforcement powers, superseding local boundaries via the Supremacy Clause, allowing operations like the Minneapolis surge without state approval. Ross, as a deportation officer, operated within this scope, with deadly force governed by Department of Justice policies permitting it only for imminent serious harm. The shooting's investigation falls exclusively to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, denying state agencies access to evidence, body cameras, or forensic details, which has fueled accusations of a cover-up from local officials. Prosecutorial discretion plays a central role, where even technical crimes may go uncharged due to evidentiary ambiguities, resource priorities, or broader contextual factors like agent safety. State and local entities assert concurrent jurisdiction for crimes like manslaughter under Minnesota statutes, with Hennepin County and the Attorney General capable of independent probes or subpoenas. However, federal preemption in immigration matters complicates this, as does qualified immunity for agents acting in official duties. Concepts like de minimis non curat lex dismiss trivial infractions, while de facto impunity describes systemic non-accountability amid competing factors. The rift is evident in Governor Walz's demands for involvement and activation of the National Guard, contrasting with federal assertions of no state role, creating a layered legal battleground where political objectives influence outcomes. These conflicts highlight the tension between federal supremacy and state rights, potentially leading to court challenges over evidence access. In this case, federal dominance under the current administration suggests non-prosecution, viewing the act as self-defense in a necessary operation. Yet, shifts in political control could reopen scrutiny, emphasizing how jurisdictional overlaps allow for delayed liability. The framework underscores the need for clear protocols in mixed authority scenarios, where laws against obstruction or harboring could extend to activists, reinforcing enforcement priorities against resistance. Micro-level justification. Debates on intent and necessity. Debates center on whether Good intended to strike Ross, with footage showing her vehicle veering past rather than toward him, suggesting flight amid chaos rather than assault. Critics argue the threat had passed when shots were fired, with Ross no longer in direct path and alternatives like moving further aside available. The residential setting, not crowded, and Good's unarmed status undermine escalation to deadly force, violating policies restricting shots at fleeing vehicles unless actively weaponized. Retired experts question tactics, noting situational awareness could have prevented the need for gunfire, framing it as reckless or execution style. Supporters counter that her acceleration created reasonable fear, especially with Ross's prior trauma, labeling the vehicle a deadly weapon in a blockade. Federal narratives emphasize weaponization and domestic terrorism, citing her role in disrupting the raid as endangering officers. The icy conditions and conflicting commands added unpredictability, making split-second judgments defensible under Supreme Court precedents like Graham v. Connor, which require objective reasonableness. Good's mindset, possibly to scare or intimidate, remains inferred, but her actions as a proactive protester align with patterns of aggressive impedance. This microanalysis reveals a split, no serious ramming effort, rendering the shooting unwarranted, yet contextual pressures like agent risks provide partial defense. The incident's complexity, tense standoff, prior interference, makes it far from clear-cut, with public polarization persisting. Ultimately, it exemplifies how individual force decisions are scrutinized against immediate facts, often overshadowing broader imperatives, though evidentiary ambiguities favor non-prosecution. Macro-level implications, immigration threats and criminal elements. On a larger scale, the operation addresses an influx of undocumented immigrants through fraud, loopholes, and open borders under prior administrations, posing imminent threats like criminals or foreign operatives. Data reveals over 13,000 non-citizens with homicide convictions living freely, with recent arrests targeting 171 murderers, many involving children. Skewed statistics, often classifying Hispanics as white and underreporting in immigrant communities, mask the crisis, inflating white offender counts while downplaying undocumented crimes. Specific cases such as Laken Riley's murder by a Venezuelan while jogging, or Jocelyn Nungari's strangulation by two Venezuelans, illustrate the human cost, with thousands of Americans killed via violence, DUIs, or assaults. Goods interference is seen as enabling these threats, potentially criminal under laws against obstruction or harboring, by impeding removals of the worst offenders. The surge, the largest ever, focuses on fraud-linked scams worth billions, heightening the necessity of unhindered enforcement. Supporters argue one such death is a justifiable trade-off if it clears paths to prevent innocents' murders, framing activists as disloyal enablers of an invasion. Federal memorials and reports underscore this, listing victims and noting 70% of arrests as convicted criminals, emphasizing the ticking time bomb of unchecked entries. This macro view justifies outcomes like non-prosecution, prioritizing national security over isolated tragedies. The incident pales against widespread harms, with calls to expand agency powers to target supporters. As divisions deepen, it highlights irreconcilable factions, where enforcement must prevail to protect citizens, transforming the event into a catalyst for broader policy resolve. Escalation and future trajectories, toward resolution through conflict. Tensions are escalating with nationwide protests turning violent, assaults in Minneapolis, marches in multiple cities and private bans on agents, potentially leading to more incidents as operations intensify. Political opposition exploits the shooting for anti-enforcement narratives, but federal dominance suggests absolution, allowing a focus on deportations amid calls for the Insurrection Act. Inevitability stems from divided sides, pro-enforcement patriots versus dissidents supporting immigrants, creating a zero-sum struggle where back-and-forth policies threaten survival, necessitating widespread hostile interaction, now under the current administration to quell resistance. The Trump term, with 3 years remaining, offers a window to utilize all resources for mass removals, extending to advocates acting illegally through funding or impedance. Laws already prohibit such support, treating it as criminal facilitation, with no large-scale counter-movements during influxes compared to current protests. Expanding ICE's scope, jurisdiction, and enforcement, beyond criminals to fraud and enablers, could resolve the crisis, endorsed by real Americans committed to strong borders against leftist concepts. This requires embracing aggressive remedies, potentially escalating to control dissidents and secure the nation. Future implications point to forgotten incidents amid bigger clashes, as the country embraces enforcement to fix the siege. Patriotic factions, especially those valuing traditional ways, must push for comprehensive actions, reducing illegal populations and opposition. This trajectory, while risky, is seen as essential for cohesion, transforming current divisions into a resolved framework favoring security and law. Conclusion: tactical decisions and enforcement debate. The Minneapolis shooting of Renee Nicole Good by Immigration and Customs Enforcement Deportation Officer Jonathan Ross, though questionable at the immediate, micro level due to video evidence showing no clear intent to run him over and the threat arguably having passed, achieves undeniable macro justification through the urgent imperative to eliminate deadly threats posed by undocumented immigrants who are killing innocent Americans daily. Good's interference, stalking, harassing, and blocking agents during their vital mission to deport criminals and fraudsters, frames her actions as a direct barrier to national safety, enabling the continuation of an invasion that has led to thousands of murders, DUIs, and assaults on citizens, particularly vulnerable white children and women. Escalating tensions, fueled by leftist agitators and corrupt local officials like Jacob Fry and Tim Walz, underscore the absolute need for decisive, unyielding enforcement, even if it requires controlled conflict to realign divided factions and suppress those undermining America's sovereignty. Ultimately, this tragic event catalyzes a powerful push for expanded ICE powers under the Trump administration, ensuring long-term resolution by prioritizing the removal of these ticking time bombs and their enablers, securing the nation for true patriots in the remaining 3 years of strong leadership. Legal and jurisdictional conflicts heavily favor moving forward under federal authority, absolving Ross's act as self-defense amid shameless exploitation by opposition forces desperate to distract from their own criminal scandals and anti-American agendas. The FBI's exclusive control, rightfully denying state access to evidence, highlights the criminality inherent in activist support like goods, which borders on treason by impeding the deportation of murderers and fraudsters under existing laws against obstruction and harboring. Inevitable clashes arise from irreconcilable views on borders, one side championing secure sovereignty, the other promoting open invasion, necessitating hostile interactions to quell dissidents who act as domestic enemies, protecting the innocent from the horrors perpetuated by illegals. This strategic positioning empowers the administration to utilize all resources fully, targeting not just the criminals but their vocal enablers, drastically reducing illegal populations and restoring stability through resolute action against those who would betray the country for woke ideologies. Broader implications emphatically emphasize embracing patriotic enforcement to fix the devastating legacy of the Biden-era invasion, with only 3 years left to act decisively and purge the threats that have flooded our borders through fraud and loopholes. Trade-offs like one obstructor's death versus preventing countless murders, such as the brutal killings of Laken Riley by a Venezuelan or Jocelyn Nungari strangled by illegals, justify these remedies without hesitation, transforming personal tragedy into national progress by deterring future interference and saving lives. America, fractured by these divisions, can only emerge secure and unified through resolved conflicts, prioritizing ironclad laws against the ongoing threats from undocumented killers and their supporters, ensuring a future where real Americans prevail over the radical left's destructive schemes. This incident, while lamentable in its isolation, serves as a call for unwavering commitment to enforcement, critiquing the stupidity of interferers like Good who place themselves in harm's way for all the wrong reasons, and conceptualizing a path forward where decisive measures quash dissent and restore order. The macro justification outweighs micro doubts, as the imperative to protect innocent lives from the illegal scourge demands no less than full-throated support for ICE's expanded role, turning potential civil unrest into the necessary purge to reclaim our nation's strength and security for generations to come.